Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stared Stats. Cade Kennedy with you, alongside Tyler Riggs. Tyler, week number 13 of the college football season. The major matchups this week, a little bit outside of where we've usually been. Usually, you had the big games of the SEC, some Big 12 stuff, all that. This week, it's all about the Midwest and the Northeast. We'll get into that. Ohio State, Indiana, Army, and Notre Dame. A lot of big, fun matchups, kind of in the places we haven't been talking about as much.
Yeah, and another week where we're really going to clear some things up, I think, when it comes to the college football playoff race and should provide for some fun results.
Absolutely. And as always, folks, before we fully get into it, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Give us your own opinions. If there's any other games we missed, leave that in there. We'd love to hear about it. But Tyler, we've got to get to the big one in Columbus. Massive top 5 matchup. Big Ten championship game implications are on the line. Who has the opportunity to get that crack at Oregon, who's already confirmed in? Indiana and Ohio State. Ohio State 13.5-point favorite right now. Some injury news that came in, though, for the Buckeyes starting center Seth McLaughlin. He's not going to be playing in this. Obviously, the Achilles injury that he has, you're not recovering from that for a while. So prayers for him. Hopefully he can recover as soon as possible. But Ohio State, you need this win because you are the one loss to Oregon. You want that rematch with them. If you want that opportunity to crawl back into the number 1 spot potentially, this would be that path to do it. If you're Indiana, you really need this win because a lot of people want you out. Let's be clear here. A lot of SEC people have already started that with Indiana about how good are they really. They're 10-0. They've been beating people up, but you had that game where you played close with Michigan. That doubt's starting to come in from a lot of people. Tyler, this should be a pretty fun game because you look at it statistically speaking, these are two of the most efficient teams in the country when it comes to offense. Indiana or defense as well. Indiana, number 2, Ohio State, number 3. When you look at it, both teams put up about the same number of yards offensively when it comes to 450 is around that mark they hit. Ohio State runs the ball a little bit better. Indiana throws it a little bit better. Those two offenses, top 3 in offensive efficiency, that is where this thing I think is really going to be won. Who has the better day there? Ohio State has the defense to match the offense. Indiana, not as much, only 28th in defensive efficiency, while Ohio State is number 8.
Yeah, I hope the stats kind of bear some meaning in the sense that this plays out as a game of two evenly matched teams. When you get to this point, and this gets brought up a lot, you mentioned the SEC. The SEC teams do this a lot. Hey, we're on paper, we've got the best talent in the country.
Yeah.
That's great. The paper doesn't play football. Star ratings do not play football, right, Kate? So at some point, you got to look at the production on the field. Indiana has done everything they've been asked of them so far in terms of their schedule. We touched on it kind of in the recap of the AP / bracketology of just, they can't control their opponents in that sense, and they've done what they've needed to do. Now's their moment. This is where they've really got to rise to that occasion because there is so much on the line here for Indiana, especially in terms of you go on the road, tough environment. And if you show you could compete with the number 2 team in the country, I think that bodes really well, win or loss, of course, for the Hoosiers when it comes to the rankings next Tuesday. I'm excited to see how that plays out. I think this team is being underestimated. The books have it about 2 touchdowns when you talk about the odds in favor of Ohio State. Part of that's probably that road bump, the fact that Indiana's got to come into that tough environment. But by the eye test, this looks like a good football team.
Yes.
Curtis Rourke has been fantastic at quarterback. I'd say better than Will Howard has been.
I'd agree.
And they've got the rest of the attack to go with it. And the defense, is at Ohio State level, maybe not quite, but 28th is still pretty darn good when you're talking about a Power 5 team, or Power 4 team, I should say.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here when we talk about the defenses, these are probably the two best run defenses in the Big Ten. Indiana only gives up 72 rushing yards a game. Now, of course, they haven't seen a duo like Judkins and Henderson. We'll see how they react to that. But with the injuries Ohio State has on the offensive line, you're going to be down now to a backup center and you have a backup left guard. That is going to make things a little bit tougher. And when you've got good guys like Mikael Kamara on the defensive line, who has 9.5 sacks this year, keep in mind, Tyler, he has been an absolute beast to deal with. Indiana has the pieces to win this game. I think Ohio State, the other thing to knock against them, those slow starts. How many times have we talked about this season for Ohio State, where it takes them about that entire first quarter to really get up for the game? If that happens again, and there's a good chance it does, Indiana has that opportunity to get their free blow in on them. If they can get that one punch and just, hey, we have an early lead, we're coming off that bye week, we feel that we can really take control of this thing, look out, because that would be something we have not seen Ohio State have to do a lot this year, play from behind against a good opponent.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a huge key to this game is can Indiana come out, seize that early momentum, kind of deflate the shoe a little bit. You're not going to take away the noise, but can you at least come out and establish some early momentum? Because we know how that environment is, right? If Ohio State comes out, gets that first touchdown, maybe they make the first stop, the first big play, all of a sudden that pressure really ratchets up for Indiana. So can they come out, seize that early momentum? And you touched on the run game. I think line of scrimmage, cliche as it is, this is where that game's going to be decided, right? Can Indiana's run defense hold tight against some good weapons that Ohio State's got? Because if you could do that, you force the game onto Will Howard's shoulders. And as we've talked about on this channel, Will Howard, Carson Beck, kind of in a similar boat. If you could force them to win the game for their team, you might be able to pull it out. You might be able to get them to make those key mistakes. Because I don't think either fan base fully trusts those quarterbacks, right? So
Exactly.
that's a big part of it. Can you put it on the quarterback's shoulders? And in that case, if Will Howard answers, then hey, kudos to him for rising to the occasion. But I do think if you ask a lot of Ohio State fans, they're worried about, hey, this game has come down to Will Howard. Indiana might be able to get this one.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this game, because it comes down to, I think ultimately what will happen in this is I think Ohio State has that slow start again. I think Indiana gets an early score. Curtis Rourke, I think he's going to play well. It's going to be a tough challenge for him. Ohio State, one of the best passing defenses in the country, only giving up 160 yards a game. They are an elite unit there. If Indiana, as cliche as it is, you already said it, it's a Big Ten game. You have to talk about the line of scrimmage. You have to talk about a Big Ten game in November. It's going to ultimately come down to who can run the ball well between two good run defenses. I think Indiana has the ability to match Ohio State for a while. Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawton, good pieces for Indiana. I think at the end of the day, this is going to be one of those where Indiana starts off strong, but Ohio State's talent ultimately wins the game for them late. This will be a 4-quarter game. I believe it'll be a fight. I think Ohio State gets a late field goal to put it away. A 10-point win for the Buckeyes would cover the spread for Indiana, would show that Indiana is a legitimate team, but I think Ohio State gets a touchdown in the fourth quarter, get a key stop, field goal late. That gives the Buckeyes the win.
And I've gone back and forth on this game, and sometimes you dig a little too hard. It feels like into the numbers, the stats, be laid at the top. On paper, these teams are largely similar, and have been very efficient. I think that win against Michigan for Indiana, albeit we know it's not a complete Michigan team, but being exposed to that type of defense, that type of environment, and getting the win, regardless of how bad Michigan's offense is, I think that gives Indiana enough confidence to not be shocked by anything in this game.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I'm going to pick the Hoosiers to prove that I was wrong.
Okay.
I think they kind of shut up the SEC haters a little bit. They go out, they get it done. I do think it's a slugfest. Like I said, it's a 4-quarter ball game. But give me Indiana to pull out the late drive to be able to win it.
There you go. I like it. I like it a lot. It's just one of those, I feel like Ohio State, at some point, that talent has to show up. I think it could be similar to the Penn State game where it comes to that, where it's just, hey, Ohio State puts themselves in a hole. Indiana looks really good. I think that's not going to change. I think this is the moment for everyone to really see, okay, Indiana's the real deal here. They deserve a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think we're both in tune on that. I believe this game's closer than what the spread indicates. Now, I will say this, and we debated a little bit. Indiana cannot go out and get killed by 3 touchdowns. It can't happen. It just can't happen. That's got to be in their mind,
Yeah,
because if they do that, if they do not rise to that occasion, fair or not, they put themselves in a very tricky situation where, Georgia and Alabama and Ole Miss and Tennessee might be able to argue, hey, we've played a tougher schedule. Sure, we've got an extra loss, but
yeah,
XYZ, rank us ahead. So
yeah,
I think Indiana's aware of that. I think Kurt Signetti very aware of that. I mean, he's played the underdog before, right? James Madison.
exactly.
He's had the hey, this nobody believes in us type of mentality because they think, oh, you're just some middle of the road uh, team that's benefiting from a weak conference. It's really no different of a situation here for them at Indiana, right? They're getting
Absolutely.
dogged because people say it's a weak environment for them. Their schedule's been weak. Yeah, they're in the Big Ten, but they haven't played the best of the Big Ten. And Chris Signetti in those moments has done very well. So I think that leadership, the talent they do have on this roster, guys that on the star ratings aren't going to pop out on the page, but in terms of production, they have produced. I feel it coming up in a way for Hoosiers that winds up with a big win.
Absolutely. I think it'll be a fun game. The only knock I can really have on this is, why is this a big noon game? I know why it is. It's just, can we not? I'm going to gripe about that until I'm, an old man. We should not be putting amazing games at 11 a.m. in the morning. I get it's great for TV ratings for Fox, but it kills stadium atmospheres. Ohio State knows it. Penn State knows it. Oklahoma knew it when they got stuck with them a lot. It's going to be a fun atmosphere nonetheless, but imagine how that place would be at night, Tyler. That's all I'm saying. I rest my
Hey,
case there.
I think true college football fans around the world will agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Because any big game like this, top 5 matchup deserves to be under lights. I totally agree.
Yeah. It'll be fun though, but we do get a good primetime game under the lights. Not at a place you'd expect it though. Yankee Stadium hosting a big event in November. Yeah, the Yankees can do that. Unlike their baseball team, they can actually host a big game in November. When it comes
Whoa,
to football,
geez.
because Army and
Woo.
Notre Dame, sorry, I'm a Yankees hater. That's how that works. Army and Notre Dame 14 and a half point favorites in this one so far. It's come down from 17 though, Tyler. People starting to maybe believe a little bit more in Army. This is going to be a weird battle because Notre Dame, they've played similar teams like Army this year. They played Navy. We saw how that went. Navy had a lot of turnovers. That game was nearly over before it even started. You play Georgia Tech, who a lot of people still like to reminisce about the triple option days, and they still do a lot of, QB run, a lot of running concepts. Notre Dame was
It's
able to
gone to a
handle
shotgun look
it.
for them now, yeah.
It has. But Notre Dame, they handled Georgia Tech pretty well. This is the last test, but this one is completely different because Notre Dame has not played a defense like Army. You're talking about a scoring defense that is tied with Ohio State for first in that category. They only give up 10.3 points per game. Army, just one of the most efficient offenses in the country, number 8 in offensive efficiency. Bryson Daly, quarterback. We cannot talk about the kid enough, even though we talk about him every single week on this show. 21 rushing TDs, 7 passing TDs. Army puts up 334 on the ground. They are amazing when it comes to that offense. But here's the problem for Army. They haven't seen a defense like Notre Dame. You're talking about the third most efficient defense in the country. The Army offense versus the Notre Dame defense is going to be an absolute show to watch. That is the battle of this game. Can Army grind it out, get that time of possession working in their favor like we're used to seeing Army do? We joked about it when they had North Texas. It got them on Champions of Life of the Week. When you have a 14-minute drive or whatever they did against North Texas, you're doing
Nearly
something
15
right.
minutes.
Yeah, nearly 15 minutes. You're doing something right. That's the formula for Army winning this game. But if it's Notre Dame, you've got to be able to shut Army down, and you've got to be able to do it fast.
Yeah, and you mentioned Notre Dame's seen teams like this so far this season. That Navy game, boy, I mean, when you cough up those turnovers if you're Navy, that's how you get to that 51-14 score. So that was a little deceptive, I think. Not saying that Notre Dame didn't do their job; they absolutely did in that contest. The problem here, I think, for Army is that, as we know with this offensive style, Cade, you fall behind a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, and you're having to play that catch up, late in a ball game.
It's extremely difficult.
You're not engineered. It's very difficult. You're not engineered to do so. And Notre Dame, since that loss to Northern Illinois, has done a really fantastic job of controlling the tempo of the game. They had that kind of uh, tight contest with Louisville, but even in that game, they jumped out to a 21-7 lead, right? And so they were able to just dictate that contest. Louisville made a comeback, but not enough. And that's something that Notre Dame has just excelled at over the course of the season. So I think if you're Army, that's the first thing you got to circle. Can we come out and dictate the tempo? Because that's the first building block to success to win a game with this type of offense. You got to control the tempo. Secondly, as you mentioned, you push through a very, very tough defense. Notre Dame's going to have the speed to match any athlete you got that includes Bryson Daly. So how creative are you getting? Is there something in the playbook, some different looks that you could pull out to kind of mask what you do? Because we know it's a simple game for Army in terms of what they're going to do. They're, run, 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 and run again until they absolutely can't just about. So what can you pull out for maybe some big momentum plays deep in that playbook? And finally, can you slow down Riley Leonard? He has been really, really good over the course of the season, has gotten just seemingly more comfortable in this system as the season has gone on. He doesn't wow you with anything he does, and part of that is he's battled some of that injury issues and has come through that, but um, he could still get it done for you and be an efficient quarterback. So can you find a way to get him uncomfortable and make some big mistakes? Those are the questions in my mind for Army in this game.
Yeah, and I'm going to say the big key for Notre Dame, when you look at their offense against Army, I think the big key to this game is their running back, Jeremiah Love. This guy that, 12 touchdowns on the year, 720 yards. Now, why do I say Notre Dame's running game is the most important? They've got Riley Leonard. He's a good dual threat quarterback. He can make some plays on the run as well. If you can get Leonard and Love both going, this is an Army team that only allows 82 yards on the ground. They have not seen this caliber of a rushing attack that Notre Dame can provide. If they can kind of out-Army a little bit, control the game like you mentioned earlier, Tyler, this has the potential to be one of those rock fights. There's a reason the over-under on this thing started at 43.5. There's a reason why all of this has been going on. People expect this to be a defensive battle, and if Notre Dame allows that run game to open, someone like a Bo Collins or a Mitchell Evans can get open and really start to try to go to town on this Army secondary, Notre Dame has the potential to turn this thing, I don't want to say into a blowout, but they can definitely hit that 17-21 type of category in this. I don't know if Army will let that happen, but that's why you play the game, Tyler.
Yeah, and I think that's a big key. I agree with Notre Dame's side of things. Can you get the ground game going enough to free up Riley Leonard to make some big plays with his arm? Can you take the top off of that Army defense a little bit? And that starts by being successful in the ground game, because then they're pushing up, trying to make sure that, hey, we're not giving up the easy yards. And that's something they've done very well, as you mentioned, throughout the season. But can you do enough to be able to hit those deep shots? Because in this type of game, like you're mentioning, the possessions are limited. The spread's low for that reason in terms of the over-under. So can you capitalize on one or two big shot plays that turn into big momentum? Because this could very easily be a game where, it's back and forth through three quarters, and then Notre Dame is able to find that little bit of a swing in the fourth quarter. You look up, and all of a sudden, Notre Dame's up 14-17 and have essentially sealed the deal in this game. So that's the blueprint for the Fighting Irish, no doubt about it. Can you control the tempo and find those big momentum plays?
Yeah, and the other key I want to get to, and this is one that's not going to be talked about, it's kind of I don't want to say a non-factor, but it hurts Army a lot. When we get late into a game, if Army is put in that scenario where you have to throw the ball, it is not going to help. Notre Dame only gives up 150 passing yards a game. They have an amazing secondary when it comes to just shutting down passing attacks. I think that hurts Army a lot if we get into the situation I think is going to play out. This feels like a back and forth game for a half. Notre Dame gets one of those big plays, like you mentioned, maybe a deep shot 30, 40 yards down the field. Momentum starts running with the Irish, and they don't pull away enough that it turns into blowout territory, But as that third quarter turns into the fourth, you get the feeling, okay, one more punch, one more score, and Notre Dame fully puts this thing away. I like Army to cover right now at 14 and a half. I like Notre Dame by 14. Give me the cover, though, for Army.
I respect that. I'm not quite sure if they'll get there just because I feel like, and I've talked about it, I think Notre Dame's really operating at a different level. That's why they are in the top 10 compared to where they were early in the season. Um, do think it's a good fight. It's just I could see a situation pretty easily where second half adjustments come into play. Notre Dame's able to quell Army enough to pull away, and you know 17-21 could be that range. I'm not going to say it's going to be Navy, type of blowout where
Yeah.
it's 51-14, but I could definitely see where, Army competes for a half and just unfortunately the talent shows up. Notre Dame makes those adjustments and they really kind of establish themselves in that second half and take control of the game down the stretch.
Absolutely. I think there's a pretty good chance that that does happen. It's just I feel like this Army team has that potential to put up the fight a lot more than Navy did. I feel like this is an Army team that
Yeah.
has proven themselves time and time again this year. You look at North Texas a few weeks ago. You're coming off a bye. That helps a lot. Even Air Force, a team that's an Air Force team that's down. It's getting better week by week still, but that was a game where you had a backup quarterback. You had, okay, let's see what we can do out here, and they still operated like normal. This Army team has shown they can bring it. I think Notre Dame, though, they play their A game, they get the job done.
Yeah, and I think that's why you see the books respect Army a bit here. It's just because, like you mentioned, they have battled through some of that adversity this year, had chances to slip up, and didn't do so. They remained perfect. So uh, I think they've earned that respect, and I think it'll show up in this game, like we're talking about. You'll see a really good fight from them. Unfortunately, boy, I think Notre Dame just got a bit too much.
Yeah, so there's a reason this Notre Dame team has been on an absolute tear, clicking in all three phases of the game: offense, defense, special teams. Can't count out a big return or a block punt. Two things Notre Dame really well at as well. But Tyler, we've got to get going to the Big 12 because we go from the cold Bronx to the duel in the desert. BYU and Arizona State going at it. Arizona State 3-point favorites, and there's a good reason for that. This Sun Devil team just absolutely momentum carrying them at this rate. K-State need a big win in the Little Apple, got it. Playing Utah, got that win when Cam Rising came back. Went to Oklahoma State in the rain. You were there for that one, Tyler. You watched Cam Scadaboo be who else? Cam Scadaboo had a big game there. This is an Arizona State team that really starts the book like the real deal every single week. You see them. BYU coming off the loss to Kansas, that we have to see how BYU reacts to that. I don't think BYU will fold. I think if they were to fold, it would have happened a long time ago. They've got a lot of resilience, but it's who comes out of this game in a big day for somebody, because whoever wins this one, Tyler, keep in mind, if Arizona State wins it, they're right there in that Big 12 championship race. That would set them up with Colorado. BYU, you win this game, you're almost guaranteed to be locked in.
Yeah, a lot on the line in this one for sure. And man, you played it out. Arizona State, they've really found some of that momentum, right? They had that word loss to Cincinnati in conference play. Um, I think that's really the only. I wouldn't say I don't know how to describe that one other than just odd, right? The Texas Tech loss early in the season, you could see because there's still some things where they're trying to figure stuff out, right? They had
Yeah.
the couple games before that played a little wonky against Mississippi State, Texas State, who were okay but not great teams, as we have found out. And besides that blemish against Cincinnati, they've taken care of business. And I think they just have a better sense of who they are, right? Cam Scadaboo is part of that identity. He's going to give you a little bit of everything. But I think this defense at times, while the stats may not show it, this defense will make some big plays. It will come through in some big spots. I saw that against Oklahoma State. Many of third downs where, Oklahoma State may have drove a little bit on, then all of a sudden here comes that defense with a big sack, a pass breakup, something of that nature to change that momentum just a bit. And when you got this offense rolling at the right time, you get Cam Scadaboo going, it opens up everything in this offense. They've got good pieces around him from top to bottom there. So it's just, can Arizona State I almost worry, Cade, about do they get too hyped for this game, right?
Yeah,
Because it's the biggest game they've had in a while.
that's what I
And
wanted
so
to get to.
you got young pieces.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to, Tyler. You look at ticket prices for this game. I want to point that out. If you can see it on the screen, $247 is the
Yeah.
cheapest ticket you can get right now in Tempe. From what I've been seeing from Arizona State people, there's a lot of hype, not just around Tempe, Phoenix getting involved. This is the biggest Arizona State game at home in a long, long time for the Sun Devils. And I think that is a legitimate question that you raised. Does Arizona State get a little bit too high on their own supply and think, hey, we're the kings of the Big 12 now. We've done it. BYU lost. We're in the all we got to do is show up and we win. And then BYU absolutely takes it to them, and BYU can reestablish themselves pretty quick. But Tyler, I want to throw some efficiency numbers at you because I thought this was a bit funny, almost kind of like we talked about last week. Arizona State, Kansas State numbers were exactly the same. It felt like offensive efficiency favors Arizona State. They're number 18 in the country. BYU's number 35. We go to defensive efficiency, if I could talk correctly. BYU, number 20. Arizona State, number 36. Almost the exact same, just completely flip-flopped around. Arizona State, the better run defense. BYU, the better pass defense. Arizona State, just interesting to me how this is going to play out for them. Being the home team, I favor towards them, but everything feels like strength on weakness in this game. Where Arizona State, they match up better. Cam Scadaboo versus a BYU running defense that's not the strength of their defense. But then you look at BYU, Jake Retzloff. What does he do well? He makes something out of nothing. Arizona State a little bit weaker on the passing defense. That helps BYU. We might be looking at a shootout on our hands, Tyler. It would not shock me if this turned into one of those 38-35 type of games. But at home, I like the Sun Devils to get it done.
Yeah, this one's a bit odd. I do think for BYU, there was a little bit of holy war hangover against Kansas, right? Where that was a tough, physical, chippy game, controversial even with BYU Utah. You could come out of that game pretty drained, and I think we saw that a little bit against Kansas. Kansas obviously riding along momentum, and did what they needed to do to win, despite not having the best game. I think BYU here, at the end of the day, comes in similar. I picture this almost kind of like their game against SMU early in the season, maybe even that Baylor game, where it's not perfect, it's not fully clean, but against a couple of teams that maybe haven't had those big moments in a while, or know how to handle. Hey, we've got a big opponent coming to town. I think BYU edges this thing out just enough to be able to get the win. Arizona State, at the end of the day, ultimately maybe just a touch young, right? We're talking about Sam Levitt, the quarterback, been very efficient, but he is a guy that is going to make a mistake or two potentially because he is a young guy. He gets a little bit ahead of himself, right? Uh, Cam Scadaboo is great, but with his career path, he hasn't seen a moment like this yet in his career. So I'm curious to see how Arizona State handles it. I think the first 10 minutes of this game, Cade, really tells us how it's going to go.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I feel for some reason that BYU does enough to sneak this one out and kind of quell, Arizona State's big run to, hey, we're going to be conference champs in the playoff.
Yeah, it's one of those that feels like everything has aligned for this moment for Arizona State. To me, it comes down to, I think home field advantage plays a big factor in this thing. If it was at BYU, I would be right there with you saying, hey, Arizona State, they've played in some tough places this year. They have not been to BYU, though, with all of this on the line. But I think with it being at home in Tempe, well, like we talked about, with how much hype there is going into this, I think that crowd gives Arizona State that little bit of juice, and not that they're running low on any. You're coming off that big K-State win. But I think it puts them over the edge. Coach Dillingham is going to have them hyped up for this game. He wants this one bad too. And I think we start to see that transition of, hey, it's Colorado and Arizona State, and then BYU kind of that third team, that third wheel, so to speak. I think that's where we're heading, Tyler. The Big 12, Conference of Chaos. We talked about it a lot this year that something weird was going to happen here. We're at that fork in the road, and that's why I'm going forks up.
No. So we split again. I think the road factor is for real, but the problem is, I think BYU already went through that with the Holy War, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that is a toxic, hostile environment for Utah. That's basically their Super Bowl with how the season has gone for them, and BYU was able to outlast in the end.
Yeah.
So I could see a situation where the environment, because of what they've already went through, doesn't phase them. Now I will say for BYU, Retzloff has to make some plays. You talked about he's prone to being able to make some plays. He's going to have to win the game for him. I don't think it's going to be a situation where he could just stand back, play average, and rely on the defense. He's going to have to make some big time plays for BYU to win this one.
Yeah, and I think so. Chase Roberts, Darius Lassiter, two big receivers for BYU. I think they're going to have to step up. I think if you beat Arizona State, it's going to have to be through the air. I think that's just going to have to be how it is. Arizona State, we talked about it. They have a good run defense. DJ Gins was able to make some noise there, had a big day, but he just couldn't get anything going in the end zone. Arizona State played lights out in that first half against K-State. I think BYU will get their points. That's why I said I expect this to be a shootout. And I really do think it's a home field coin flip game. But Tyler,
it definitely turn out that way, no doubt, no doubt.
But Tyler, it is time to get to upset alert. And as always, the way we do upset alert on this channel, there's the 3 different types of upset alerts you can get. There's an advisory, there's a watch, and a warning, kind of similar to the weather. It's amazing how that works. But Tyler, we've got to start with the other big game on Fox. Right after Ohio State, Indiana, we'll be going over to Arrowhead Stadium, home of, not just the Kansas City Chiefs this year, but Kansas, playing a lot of their games at KC. And they've got to play Colorado, who has just continued to look better every single week they have played. You see that improvement. Colorado, they're in prime position, dare I say, to be the Big 12 favorite. They're a 3-point favorite in this one over Kansas, who they seem to just love to play that spoiler role now. They beat Iowa State 2 weeks ago. They go and win in Provo. Can Kansas complete the trifecta and get another big win, another feather in their cap?
Yeah, I mean, boy, Kansas has turned into quite frankly, maybe the best 4-6 team in the country, right, Kay? They could legit claim it the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks. So this is not a safe environment for Colorado. They got to be careful here not to be added to the Kansas late season pelt of, hey, we're angry, we're not going to win the conference, but by God, we're going to make everybody else pay.
Yeah, and this is one of those that, I can't call this a trap game if you know the trap is coming, if you know what I mean. I think this is one that earlier in the year, had Kansas not beaten BYU or Iowa State, but played competitive with them, you could have said, hey, second to last game of the season, Kansas, hold on, everybody, that, Jalen Daniels could still be a playmaker. But I don't think it could be a trap game if you know what's coming into the saying, hey, they just beat BYU last week. We know the challenge in front of us for this one. It's going to be a fun game, Tyler. That's why I've got an upset watch for this game. I think has the real potential to be back and forth. But with the way Colorado's played the last few weeks, I think they find a way to win this one.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And you know why, Kate? It's not because of Travis Hunter, the Heisman hopeful. Shadur Sanders has quietly put together a really great middle to back half of the season. He just makes big throw after big throw after big throw. And to be fair, I don't think Kansas has seen a quarterback of that caliber this season, right? I mean, Iowa State, we like Rocco Beck, but I wouldn't mistake him for a potential first overall pick like Shadur Sanders is, and the same for Jake Retzloff. So I think Shadur Sanders winds up being the difference here. And yeah, I like Colorado in a bit of a back and forth contest to be able to pull it out and continue their quest to be right in that hunt for the Big 12 title.
And that's where I'm at. I think Kansas will get their points. Their offense is good enough to generate something. It's just, I don't think the one team I would not want to try to get into a shootout with right now would be Colorado. In the Big 12, yeah. I think that's the one team you can't really do it with. Travis Hunter, he needs another big game to really, not solidify himself as the front runner. I think he's done that already for most people. But this could be the game where he puts himself over the top to where it says, okay, he is the guy. He has to be the Heisman now, right? I think that's what happens. I think Colorado, not a big win score-wise, but a big win momentum-wise.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Coach Prime quelling those talks of him to Dallas maybe for another week.
Maybe we'll have that. Could be its own completely crazy story. We'll have to monitor
Yeah.
that as well. But we've got to get one more game in here on upset alert, and it's one that is going to sound a little bit crazy until you think it out a little bit. Ole Miss at Florida. I'm not going to go. I'm going to put upset advisory on this one. I don't think it's as likely as Colorado and Kansas could be, and even that I don't think is going to be super likely. Ole Miss 10.5-point favorite in this one. But Florida, you're 5-5. It's a game in the swamp. We know how that goes. Just ask what happened to LSU last week. Florida has that momentum on their side. Ole Miss coming off a bye. Does Ole Miss still have a little bit of a hangover from that Georgia win? Is going to be the question. It's an 11 a.m. game, noon Eastern. It's the early game there. We say this often when it comes to basketball, and I think it applies to football too. Those early kicks, they help the underdog. When it's a ranked team coming in, you've got to get yourself up for the game a little bit more. I think that helps Florida here a little bit. Ole Miss, we've seen some of that inconsistency at times. Not as much the past few weeks, to Ole Miss's credit, but I want to see how this works with a Florida team trying to really make that statement of, hey, let's not wait until Florida State. Let's go get bowl eligible right now. We beat LSU. We know what we're doing here. Let's get the job done.
Yeah, I think this Florida team in a lot of ways mirrors what we're seeing with Kansas, right? Where they're starting to really find some late in the season, and there's the belief that, hey, you know what? We're a better team than what's shown so far. Let's continue that. So this is not an easy atmosphere, no question, for Ole Miss to be able to walk into and try to deal with. And if DJ Lagway comes out again as an X factor early, watch out because that could spell some disaster for Ole Miss. Because man, when he gets going, and you have to deal with his, dual threat capability, even though he didn't really do it against LSU, um, you got a lot of weapons that you got to worry about for Florida and that offense. And this is a bit of a dangerous Florida team right now. I can see where, like I said, this is the one you need to keep your eye on for sure.
Absolutely. It feels like that. I don't want to say it feels like it's going to be a weird game because I think that already happened with Florida LSU last week. But the vibes are kind of there for the same thing. We're Ole Miss, number 9 in the country. You're just trying to think, okay, walk the tightrope. We beat Florida. We beat Mississippi State. We get out of here. Don't have to play in the SEC title game. This is your real last mistake you could make, which is crazy to say because we know Egg Bowl shenanigans could be weird. But this is your last real chance to mess yourself up and not make the playoff, I feel like. You have to win this game or else things completely go out of control. And I think Ole Miss is able to win it. I think it'll be a tight game. 10.5 might be a little bit too much. I think this is a 7-point game when everything's all said and done. But I still like Ole Miss to win this one.
Yeah, I think Lane Kiffin has shown he can prepare his teams for these type of moments, right? Whereas early in his career, maybe not so much. Um, so I agree with you. I think it's within the spread, but ultimately, Ole Miss finds a way to get it done in the end. Has a bit of a scare, but they keep themselves alive in the conversation for the college football playoff at least another week.
Absolutely. And so now we go from upset alert to the best of the rest, the other games that might go a little bit under the radar when you think about them. And this one, Tyler, one that was so under the radar, I did not even have it on the list until I looked at it today and thought about it a little bit more. It's Texas A&M at Auburn. And believe it or not, Texas A&M is only 2.5-point favorites in this game. And I mean, it's one that
Yeah,
I think everyone's kind of expecting A&M to be A&M almost in a way. You expect, hey, we're looking ahead to Texas. Who cares about going to Auburn? It's still a weird place to play at. Can be a tough environment. I think a lot of people expect A&M to have some trouble here, but Tyler, I think Auburn is so bad this year that it may not even matter.
yeah, it's really not a great team, is it?
No.
It's kind of we saw it up and close with that OU game where there's a lot of issues for this Auburn program right now when it comes to their football team, and that's what kind of gets me in this. I don't think they've got the horses per se to be able to pull off this win. I can see a situation where Texas A&M has a bit of a slow start. Auburn's kind of getting at them early, but I think this is one of those where Mike Elko shows he is not Jimbo Fisher, right? That hey, we're not going to have these type of losses under his tenure. You might lose some big games, but you're not going to lose the ones where you get caught lacking a little bit. I think that's what it shows in this ball game.
Yeah, it's one that I think you could give A&M the slow start. You could give A&M a turnover as well, and I still think they're going to get the job done. It's just I do not trust Auburn at all this year. Even if you add in the Auburn home voodoo that people like to apply to them, I think that doesn't even do it for them. This is an Auburn team that a few games ago we saw them get stonewalled by Vandy. And Vanderbilt's a good, better team this year. The Vanderbilt's just straight up a better team than Auburn. This is where we're at this year. I think Auburn can play competitive for a while, but Auburn, they lose this one, and then you got the Iron Bowl down the road. Things not looking well again for the Tigers.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. That's something the fan base doesn't want to hear, but I think that's the truth. I mean, that the fact that we're saying, hey, Vandy's just a straight up better team this year. Woo, oh boy, does that really put you in a where the state of Auburn football is right now? And again, those issues will show up in this one. We've seen Texas A&M be able to take advantage of these situations so far. I think it happens here again.
Yeah, it's just I feel like Auburn could make this competitive for a while, but I don't see them pulling out any sneaky magic here. But Tyler, one final game to get to, and it's Iowa State and Utah, the night game on Fox. Iowa State 7.5-point favorites in this one. Line keeps going up in the direction of the Cyclones. Iowa State desperately needs this win to stay alive in that Big 12 championship race. A loss here and they're obviously done, but they've got Utah on the road. Still a difficult environment to play at Utah, even though they're 4-6, even though they've been doing the quarterback shuffle, even though they've been hammered by just about everybody. They still have a good defense. They still have the ability to, if Micah Bernard can get a little bit of running room, this can be a long day, or a short day, technically, with how they might want to try to control the clock. But Utah has the ability to win this game. If they can make it a Big Ten-style slugfest, I could see Utah doing it if they were a little bit more healthy, but they're not, Tyler. They're just simply not.
Yeah, that's been unfortunate for the Utes this season. You kind of wonder what could have been with a fully healthy team. That being said, we kind of find out, I think, with this game, is this team checked out fully this season or not, right? Because you lose that grueling Holy War game, controversial a little bit. Now you've got an Iowa State team coming to you who desperately needs a win. Can you make them earn it, or are you going to let them kind of waltz through it and get to a get-right spot in this game? That's what I want to see. Utah doesn't win. I mean, hey, it's just how the season goes. But can they make Iowa State earn this one and show, hey, we're still fighting, we're still working hard for the future of this program?
Yeah, and for Iowa State, it's still the quest to have a 10-win season. They have not had a 10-win regular season before, if I remember correctly. Iowa State still, even if they don't make the Big 12 title game, there's still a lot they're playing for when it comes to that number there. For Matt Campbell to cement himself even further as the potential greatest coach in the history of Iowa State football, that, hey, look at what we continue to build here in Ames. The future still looks bright. Rocco Becht is still a young quarterback. Look at everything we could continue to show who the world really show who Iowa State can be. This is still not the Iowa State of a decade ago that their crowning achievement was beating Oklahoma State in double overtime that one time. But, Iowa State, they're still a good program. And it's kind of weird to me that they just immediately got lost in the shuffle after losing to Texas Tech and Kansas, that a lot of Iowa State fans kind of turned to, okay, well, the season's over. We're probably losing out now. This sucks. They still have a lot to play for here.
Yeah, they do. And I think for Matt Campbell, especially as a head coach, has a lot to, be able, if he's able to get this one, that helps his legacy. Because remember, there was a point where this guy was considered, hey, the NFL is going to make a run at him. He stays. They kind of fall off a little bit. Now he's back. So I think for Matt Campbell, just as a head coach, this is big. Be able to prove that, hey, I am indeed a guy that could sustain success as I've built the program.
Absolutely. But either way, I like Iowa State to win here. It'll be a tough environment. Would not be shocked that this is a 4-quarter game, but Iowa State just has more talent than Utah does right now. And it's not really Utah's fault. It's just so many people beat up on that team.
Yeah, that's the big deal. They're just not healthy enough, right? They're just not healthy enough to pull off a win this caliber. We saw it in the BYU game. A healthier Utah team beats BYU in that ball game. I think this one goes a little bit similar to that, maybe not as tight, but I do think, Utah makes them earn it. But yeah, it's just evident, hey, they don't have the horses.
Absolutely. So, folks, as always, that'll do it for the preview of Week 13. Should be another monumental week. We finally kind of get into that other shake-up side. We saw it in the SEC last week. Now we'll see how it plays out everywhere else. And, folks, you'll want to stick around for the ride. So, as always, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. If you've made it all 45 minutes in the video, we hope you liked it by this point. But feel free to hit that notification bell as well to be notified when every video comes out. And as always, at 93 subscribers right now, trying to get to that triple-digit mark before the end of the year. If you can get there, if you can help us get there, we would sincerely appreciate it. It only takes a minute of your two out of your day to do all this stuff that we kindly ask of you. We do sincerely appreciate it. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.